relatively small number of people, relatively quiet in the Meteor world. To give a rough précis of what's happened over the past year, a year ago we were having lots of people coming to us with exciting things they were building, lots of pet projects and stuff like that, people starting their new enterprises using Meteor and so on, because it was such a wonderful way to kind of provide a rich client experience with live data, which was almost impossible to replicate using other means. What happened over the last year is that new things came along, like, well, not just over the last year, but React kind of gained mass adoption. There were other things that made Meteor seem a bit more like a walled garden. People started moaning about, well, they'd always have been, about the reliance on Mongo and so on. And essentially, it seems like Meteor has had to have a rethink about what it is and how it works and how it integrates with the wider Node world. And has taken steps to kind of address this and redefine its USP, as I will hopefully explain. So where do you find Meteor news? These are a relatively broad-ranging group of websites. The forums.meteor.com, there's all sorts of stuff in here. It is quite noisy. There's people asking for help on their specific project, but there are also threads about the future of Meteor, things that have just been released. It's well worth keeping an eye on at the very least. The official blog has the most important announcements from the MDG, the group that is responsible for Meteor. Meteor Weekly is probably the best weekly roundup of Meteor news. There's also This Week in Meteor, but that hasn't been updated since February, so Meteor Weekly I would recommend. And then Transmission, actually, if you're going to look at one of these sites, well, if you're going to invest any time in this, Transmission is probably the best place to look. It's a relatively new kind of video blog, which has, actually it's not video, is it? I think one of them was video. Anyway, it's Ben Strahan, who generally has as guest one of the tech team at MDG. It's been Sashko quite a lot of times, but he's had other people on as well, talking about what they're about to bring out in MDG in terms of new features and stuff they're going to do in the future. It's fascinating. It's really in-depth. Every episode is like an hour long, and there's lots of them. So it's really, really interesting. I would thoroughly recommend it if you have time to listen to that sort of thing. And that really is kind of cutting-edge stuff. So that's where the news comes from. History as well, this is always worth keeping an eye on if you want to know where the cutting edge is with Meteor. This is the stuff that's just been released, all the changes in the most recent version and the changes that are slated for the next released version. You can see before that version is released what's going to be in there. And you can also play with it if you want to have a look at the development branch, but you know that's obviously not necessarily going to work. And you're creating news. If you're not, please create some news. Like Alan said, anything you do which is potentially interesting, which touch on Meteor in any way, we want to hear about. So, you know, please come and speak to us, or post it in the Gitter channel. We're kind of loitering in there at all times, pretty much. So you should get some kind of response if you want to send us a message. MDG. So, what have they been up to? That's really all the news this month. So, the latest version. Last time we had a meetup, which was about just less than 2 months ago, I think. We were awaiting the release of 1.3. Since then, we've had 1.3, 1.3.1, 1.3.2, and then very quickly up to 1.3.2.3. The main things that have changed are we now have full ES 2015 CommonJS module support with some care required. The care kind of involves the fact that there are, due to the isomorphic nature of Meteor, there are some NPM packages which don't expect to be included on the server, and Leaflet, for example, assumes there is a window object, and so you can't import it. You have to conditionally import it, which you can't do with imports. You have to require it, so that's kind of falling back to not ES 2015, but still, you have kind of full support and a few workarounds. You can import NPM modules directly, which is the sort of thing that people have been used to, people building Node apps have been used to for ages, but in Meteor it's awesome, makes things really easy. You can also kind of bizarrely import other stuff like style sheets in your JavaScript. So if you have a package that has some CSS in it, you can import the CSS from your JavaScript, and it will get added to the document head. Which is kind of cool because there's some states, like if you're using SAS, I don't think, unless anybody wants to correct me, I don't think SAS can import CSS, which is really annoying. Even though it's like semantically, it's valid SAS. If it's a CSS file, it won't import it. But you can do that now directly in your JavaScript, so that's great. And it's got these other features, so generators from ES 2015 and async await support, which is going to be useful in some Apollo applications, as I'll come to. So yeah, 1.3.2.3, it's a big change from how Meteor was before, but it's great, and it really blends it nicely with the broader Node ecosystem. But that leaves people asking, to a certain extent, what is Meteor? Why am I having a meetup? Why should I start my new project in Meteor? It's a great build tool. It makes developing stuff for a variety of platforms, so mobile as well, really easy. Is that enough for me to kind of want to kind of back this horse? Well, Meteor's main, I think its biggest selling point has always been live data. The fact that you can have multiple clients connected to a server, and one client can make a change and the other clients will see that, and their UI will update almost magically. It always has been historically tied to MongoDB, which some people don't like particularly. You have to be quite careful in terms of your publications and subscriptions to make sure that you don't kind of kill your server and that you don't publish information you shouldn't be publishing. So what appears to be really the next big push, I was to summarise the news for 2016, I'm pretty sure Apollo is going to be the summary. It is like a generalisation of live data, so it's a way of allowing you to supply data from a variety of sources. So it could be MongoDB, could be SQL, could be REST endpoints, could be something else like Internet of Things, stuff, sensors, whatever, publishing information using the GraphQL protocol from your server to connected clients, which allows you to have a really kind of, as well as having some of the niceties of live data, have a really rich development experience where the client can say, okay, well, if anybody's used GraphQL will know this, they can say, okay, here's the information I want. I only want this information. Here's the shape I want it to be in. And at that point, you can start coding. You can start building your UI. And GraphQL will, if in the first case, will give you mock data if you want in exactly the same shape as what you've defined. Whoever it is who's building the back end can then worry about pulling those sources together, working out how that's like how they're going to connect all the various sources and so on, which is undoubtedly going to be more complicated than traditional live data, but it fills a hole that wasn't previously filled, and then publish and then make that available to the client, and then GraphQL kind of allows the two to kind of connect together pretty seamlessly. That's a huge simplification, but there is loads of information. You can tell MDG's intent just from the amount of recent high quality stuff that they've put out on this. The website's really slick. The blog is really interesting and regularly updated. The example apps are really cool, and this is something that's in early alpha. So I encourage you to go and have a look. I really think this is what we're going to be talking about mostly in terms of Meteor from here on in. It's an amazing project. There's nothing really that is equivalent to it. And yeah, I think we should all get involved. And it's another good way. It's another good kind of destination for people like toy apps, people to do stuff in their spare time and show it off. I built this thing with Apollo that kind of connected, like had data sources coming from here, there, and everywhere. So there's some from a REST endpoint and some from the local MongoDB and some from like this sensor in my like cat's litter tray or whatever. And look, it's all being published at the same time. That's the sort of thing we really want to see. So yeah, that's huge. Other things, so they've turned off free hosting. That's a sad face. It's kind of slanted because it's italic, but that's just a sad face. Upgrade to Node 4 is coming sometime soon. We're still on 0.10.43. But yeah, it seems like an upgrade to Node 4 is going to come in Meteor Core sometime soon. Major Meteor components now in their own repos, so stuff like Blaze and the React tools and accounts now have their own repos, which just means that if you want to raise issues or submit pull requests, you have to do it on the main repo, which is always a bit of a pain because there's kind of a lot going on there. And Apollo t-shirts, just because these exist. I've seen them on videos. No idea whether we'll get any, but they're quite nice. So that's something. Discuss. So that's hopefully some things to talk about as we eat burritos. Community, what else is going on? So there is a European Meteor Unconference going on in Berlin on the 15th of July. An Unconference is something which is organised and produced by the community. So people can propose their own talks, and you can define your own schedule and stuff like that. Ask us if you're interested in going to this. There's other stuff going on in Berlin that week. I can't remember what it is, but apparently it's a great week to be in Berlin, and it's in July. So plus when is not a great week to be in Berlin. So if you're interested, speak to us. We may well have access to discount codes. So yeah, if you think it might be worthwhile, then please come and speak to us. What's your news? So yeah, just to reiterate, we're really interested in whatever you've got on, whatever you've got to say. Please come and talk to us. That's another way of getting in touch, the GitHub repo. Gitter is probably better if you use Gitter at all, but you can leave issues on the GitHub repo and we will respond to them. And that's everything from me.